What if your entire childhood was a lie, engineered by your own father to prove his theories? When a brilliant daughter uncovers the truth behind her upbringing, she doesn't just want answers. She wants revenge. From the outside, Dr. Charles Whittaker's home was the picture of academic success. The walls were lined with books, the air always humming with the low murmur of classical music, and the dinner table was a place for debate, not comfort. His daughter, Julia, was his pride and joy, a prodigy who spoke 3 languages by age 10, won science fairs by 12, and was on track for an Ivy League scholarship before she could drive. Friends and teachers marveled at her discipline and intellect. But Julia always felt like a specimen under glass, her every move observed, measured, and recorded. Her father's praise was always conditional, his affection doled out as a reward for achievement. Julia's mother, a quiet woman with tired eyes, seemed to fade further into the background each year. Julia's childhood was a series of tests, literal and figurative. She was pushed to her limits, denied comfort when she failed, and taught to see emotion as weakness. She learned to hide her tears, to channel her anger into ambition, to become the perfect daughter her father demanded. But as Julia prepared to leave for college, she stumbled upon a locked drawer in her father's study. Inside, she found a thick file labeled Project J. The file was filled with charts, graphs, and detailed notes, her milestones, her failures, her reactions to every challenge and setback. At the bottom was a letter: subject has exceeded all expectations. Hypothesis confirmed, environment can override nature. Further testing required. Julia's hands shook as she realized the truth. She wasn't just his daughter. She was his experiment. Julia's world tilted on its axis. She read through the file, her father's cold, clinical language cutting deeper than any childhood slight. Every moment she'd thought was spontaneous, her first piano recital, her friendships, even her heartbreaks, had been orchestrated, manipulated, and recorded. Her father had engineered her life to prove his theories about human development, using her as a living case study. She confronted her mother, who broke down in tears. "I tried to stop him," she whispered. "But he said it was for your own good. He said you'd thank him one day." Julia's anger boiled over. She realized her mother had been a bystander, complicit in her father's grand design. Julia's sense of self, her pride, her pain, her very identity, felt like a lie. Determined to confront her father, Julia waited until he returned from campus. She slammed the file onto his desk. "What is this?" she demanded. Dr. Whittaker didn't flinch. "It's my life's work," he said calmly. "And you are my greatest achievement." Julia's hands shook with rage. "I'm not your project. I'm your daughter." He smiled, as if she'd proven his point. "You're stronger than you know, Julia. I made you that way." Julia's anger turned to obsession. She pored over every page of the file, searching for proof that she was more than a product of her father's manipulation. But the evidence was damning. Her friendships had been monitored, her failures engineered, her triumphs celebrated only when they fit his narrative. Even her first love, a boy named Ben, had been chosen by her father, who'd encouraged the relationship, then sabotaged it to study her response to heartbreak. Julia's memories became suspect, every happy moment tainted by the possibility of control. She withdrew from her friends, unable to trust anyone. She stopped answering her father's calls, ignoring his attempts to justify his actions. But the anger simmered, growing into a need for vengeance. Julia decided she wouldn't just confront her father, she would expose him. She began documenting everything, recording conversations, copying files, and gathering evidence. She reached out to former students and colleagues, discovering a pattern of manipulation that extended beyond her own life. Dr. Whittaker had used his theories on others, always in the name of science. Julia realized she wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for everyone her father had hurt. Julia's plan took shape slowly. She knew her father's reputation was everything to him. His career, his legacy, his sense of self, All depended on the image of the brilliant, ethical scientist. Julia decided to strike where it would hurt most, his public persona. She contacted a journalist known for exposing academic scandals. Together, they built a case, gathering testimonies from former students, colleagues, and even Julia's mother. The journalist was shocked by the depth of Dr. Whittaker's manipulation. "This is more than unethical," she said. "It's monstrous." Julia also reached out to Ben, her first love. He admitted he'd been approached by Dr. Whittaker, offered a scholarship in exchange for participating in the experiment. Ben apologized, his voice thick with regret. Julia forgave him, realizing he too had been a pawn in her father's game. As the story came together, Julia felt a sense of power she'd never known. She was no longer the subject of an experiment, she was the architect of her own destiny. The day the article was published, Julia watched as her father's world began to crumble. The expose hit the academic world like a bomb. Dr. Whittaker was suspended from the university, his research called into question. Former students came forward with their own stories of manipulation and betrayal. The media swarmed the Whittaker home, reporters camped on the lawn, cameras flashing. Julia's father tried to defend himself, insisting his work was for the greater good. But the evidence was overwhelming. The university launched an investigation, and Dr. Whittaker's colleagues distanced themselves. Julia's mother filed for divorce, finally breaking free from the man who had controlled her life for decades. Julia felt a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. She had destroyed her father's legacy, but the cost was high. Her family was shattered, her childhood memories forever tainted. But for the first time, Julia felt free. She was no longer her father's project, she was her own person. In the weeks that followed, Julia struggled to rebuild her life. She moved out of her childhood home, cutting ties with her father. She started therapy, working through the trauma of her upbringing. The process was slow and painful, but Julia was determined to heal. She reconnected with old friends, explaining the truth behind her childhood. Some were sympathetic, others struggled to understand. Julia found solace in her mother, who apologized for her role in the experiment. "I should have protected you," she said, tears streaming down her face. Julia forgave her, realizing they were both victims of Dr. Whittaker's ambition. Julia also reached out to Ben, rekindling their friendship. Together, they found comfort in shared pain, supporting each other as they moved forward. Julia began to see herself not as a victim, but as a survivor. Julia decided to use her experience to help others. She spoke at conferences, sharing her story and warning against the dangers of unchecked ambition. She wrote articles, appeared on podcasts, and became an advocate for ethical research. Her voice resonated with others who had been manipulated or controlled, inspiring them to speak out. Dr. Whittaker's reputation was ruined. He lost his job, his awards, and his standing in the academic community. He retreated from public life, refusing to acknowledge his wrongdoing. Julia felt a sense of closure, knowing she had taken back her power. She changed her name, symbolically breaking free from her father's legacy. Julia Whittaker became Julia Lane, a woman defined not by her father's experiment, but by her own choices. Despite everything, Julia knew she needed one last confrontation with her father. She visited him in his small apartment, finding him a shadow of the man he once was. He greeted her with a mixture of pride and resentment. "You proved my theory," he said. "You became stronger because of what I did." Julia shook her head. "I became stronger in spite of you, not because of you." She told him she forgave him, not for his sake, but for her own. "You don't control me anymore," she said. "I'm done being your project." Dr. Whittaker tried to argue, but Julia stood firm. She left his apartment with a sense of peace, knowing she had closed the final chapter of her father's experiment. Julia built a new life, surrounded by friends who supported and understood her. She continued her advocacy work, helping others break free from toxic relationships and reclaim their identities. She found joy in small things: music, art, laughter, love. She honored her mother's courage, supporting her as she rebuilt her own life. Julia and Ben grew closer, their friendship blossoming into something more. Together, they created a home filled with warmth and honesty, a stark contrast to the cold, calculated world Julia had grown up in. Julia's story inspired others to speak out, to challenge authority, to demand respect and autonomy. She became a symbol of resilience, proof that even the deepest wounds could heal. Years later, Julia stood on a stage, accepting an award for her work in ethical research and advocacy. She looked out at the audience, her heart full. "We are not the sum of what's been done to us," she said. "We are the choices we make, the love we give, the lives we build." As she left the stage, Julia felt a sense of closure. Her father's experiment was over. She was no longer Daddy's little project. She was Julia Lane, her own creation, her own masterpiece. If you believe in the power to reclaim your story and break free from toxic legacies, share this story with someone who needs hope. What would you do if you discovered your life was an experiment? Let us know in the comments below.